Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sunday School. For the time being, we're going to have online Sunday School. They'll be posted on our website so you and your family can watch them whenever you would like. We got these new Bibles called Growing in God's Love. They're these new children's Bibles. We have a couple extra in the office. If anyone would like a copy for their families, please let us know so you can work along with us. I will get these posted online, the pages that we're using each week, so you can follow along either way. And we're going to start for the first few weeks learning about some strong women and men of the Old Testament. People sometimes think that the Old Testament stories are all about men. Wrong. Strong, faithful women are all over the Old Testament. They left their homes for new lands. They protect others. They spoke out against evil. They were leaders. God chose them to show others how to follow in God's ways. We meet many of these women as wives and mothers: Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. These were important in traditional roles for women in the Israelite culture. In those roles, they took care of the home, and their children grew up to be leaders for the people. You'll also meet Miriam, Moses' sister, who saved his life. Much later, she helped him lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt into freedom as they journeyed into the land promised to them by God. You'll meet wise women like Ruth and Naomi and Deborah, who was a judge. The stories of Vashti and Esther remind us of the important role of women as voices of justice in the culture. And there are others whom God used in God's plan for helping people remember God's commandments. The strong men in the Old Testament aren't always grown men. In these stories, you meet boys, teenagers, and old men, but God calls each one to an important task. Some are strong in body, and others are filled with wisdom. As you hear the stories of Abraham and Moses, Joshua and Jacob and Samuel, think about their strength. Remember the ways that God called them as leaders for God's people. When you read these stories, remember that they were written a very long time ago. Some of them may sound strange to you, such as God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son. Other stories make us wonder why women like Ruth and Naomi needed help to live on their own. All of the strong women and men in these stories want to live in God's ways and be faithful to God. Their stories remind us that God is always with us then and today. And we're going to start in Genesis chapter 18, 1 through 15, and chapter 21, 1 through 7. This story is called God Made Sarah Laugh. Do you remember the last time you laughed so hard that your whole body shook? Listen to this story about Sarah's deep belly laugh. Sarah and Abraham had been traveling a long time. They stopped and set up their tents. The bright afternoon sun was hot. Abraham was sitting under the shade of the big trees when he spotted 3 visitors. He ran to greet them. Abraham said to them, "Come rest in the shade of my tree. I will bring water to wash your feet. I will bring you a meal to make you stronger for your journey." The visitors said that they had a message for Sarah. Abraham ran to her. "Use the best flour we have and bake something delicious for our visitors." Sarah began to knead the dough. Then Abraham ran to the place where the cattle were kept and took the best one from the herd to his servant. "Prepare the best calf and make a delicious meal for our visitors." The servant quickly stoked the fire. Abraham gathered some milk and butter. When the bread was baked and the meat was cooked, Abraham served their visitors. Sarah took a deep breath and listened from inside the tent as the visitors ate. She heard them ask, "Where is Sarah?" Abraham replied, "Sarah is right here in the tent." Sarah was about to poke her head out to say hello when she heard the visitors say, "I will come back to see you and Sarah in 1 year, and Sarah will have a son." A loud laugh burst from deep in Sarah's belly. How in the world could I have a baby? My old body can't have a baby. God spoke through the visitor. Why did you laugh? What if God could make this promise come true? In 1 year, I will return. Sarah will have a son. And do you know what? Sarah's baby was born when she was very old. Sarah held her baby close. She looked into his beautiful face and she said, God made me laugh. I believed this day would never come, but now you're here. I will call you Isaac because it means laughter. I want to remember how I laughed forever. So now, for those of you who either have the Bible or are able to look at it on our website, we have 3 questions to answer. You guys can answer as a family and pause the video between each one, and then you can let me know your answers. The first one is to think about how we hear. So why do you guys think Sarah laughed? And what did her laugh sound like, that deep belly laugh? All right, so after you guys have had a chance to discuss that together, our next question is, what do you think Sarah's baby Isaac looked like? All right, and our last question for this story, God kept his promise to Sarah, and Sarah had a little baby boy she named Isaac. So how will you keep your promises the way God kept the promises to Sarah? All right, so that was our first story about Sarah and Abraham and Isaac. Our next story is also about Abraham and Isaac. This one is called The Hardest Thing, and it's from Genesis 22, 1 through 19. It's a bit of a scary story here. Some stories, even some stories in the Bible, make it really easy to tell who the good people are. The good people are really good. In this story, Abraham is the really good person. He's so good that he trusts God even when God asks him to do the hardest thing. This story can be hard to read or to hear because God asks Abraham to do such a hard, scary thing. And it doesn't tell us what Abraham is thinking. Now remember, this story is about telling everyone how much Abraham trusts God. That's the good news in this very hard story. Abraham didn't know that God wanted to test him when God called Abraham. "Here I am," Abraham said. "Take your son Isaac, whom you love so much, up a mountain. I will show you which one. There you will do a very hard thing, the hardest thing. You will offer your son as a burnt offering." People offered gifts to God by burning them in those days. Usually it was an animal like a lamb, not a human like Isaac. Abraham got up early the next morning and packed for the trip. He took a donkey, firewood, fire, a knife, his son Isaac, and 2 servants from his house. After traveling for 3 days, Abraham saw the mountain, still very far away. He left the donkey and the 2 servants. He said, "We'll be back after we worship God on the mountain. Stay here." Abraham put the firewood on Isaac's back. Abraham carried the fire and the knife for the sacrifice. Isaac noticed that they had everything for a burnt offering except a lamb. "Father," he said, "where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" "God will provide the lamb, my son," Abraham said. Now comes the scary part. On the mountain, Abraham piled up the wood for a big fire. He tied up Isaac and put him on the pile. Just as he picked up the knife, a messenger from God called from heaven, "Abraham, stop! Don't touch Isaac. Now I know that you trust God. You were willing to do the hardest thing, hurt your son when God told you to." Nearby, Abraham saw a ram stuck in a bush. He offered it as a burnt offering instead of Isaac. God's messenger called to Abraham. God says, "Because you have done such a hard thing and were prepared to offer your son to me, I will make you this promise. Your family will be as many as the stars in the sky and sand on the beach. And they will be safe for a long, long time. Everyone in the world will be blessed because of your family." What a great blessing. Abraham and Isaac went back to the servants, and they all went home together. Now we have a few questions to answer. What's the scariest story you've ever heard? And how did it make you feel? Did it ever make you wonder about God? And what did you wonder? Next, have you ever seen something you needed in an unexpected place, like the ram in this story? And what was it? And our last question, what sorts of things do you think God asks you to do? All right, I know that was a tough story to hear. I hope you guys had some good answers to the questions. I hope to hear them from you. Our next story comes from Genesis 24, verses 1 through 67. This one's called God Tugs at Rebekah's Heart. How do you all welcome guests into your home? Do you invite them to sit down? Do you offer something to drink or to eat? Well, listen for how Rebekah and her family welcomed a stranger. Rebekah lived with her family in a city. And each night before dinner, it was her job to get water from the city well. One night, Rebecca went to the well with other women from the city, and she carried her big water jar on her shoulders. After she filled her jar with water, she saw a stranger praying to God. The man looked up from his prayer and saw Rebecca. "Please," he asked, "may I have a sip of your water?" "Of course," said Rebecca kindly. "Drink all you want, and I will go and get water for your camels too." Rebecca ran back to the well. She filled her jar again and again until every animal had water. Then Rebecca invited the stranger to join her family for dinner. Before they ate, the man said, "I have something amazing to tell you. I work for a man called Abraham. He is part of your family. Abraham and his wife Sarah followed God far from here. When they were very old, they had a baby named Isaac. Now Isaac is all grown up. Abraham sent me here to find someone for Isaac to marry. I was asking for God's help at the well, and that's when I saw Rebecca. I know that she is the one for Isaac." Rebecca's family thought about how far away Rebecca would be if she agreed to marry Isaac. But Rebecca's family felt God tugging on their hearts. They agreed that God was calling Rebecca to marry Isaac. The man begged the family to send Rebecca with him the very next day. Rebecca's family said, "This is a big decision, and only Rebecca can decide." So they called Rebecca and asked her, "Do you want to go with this man? Do you want to marry Isaac?" Rebecca thought about the journey she would take. Rebecca wondered what this man called Isaac was like. But Rebecca felt God tugging at her heart. She said, "Yes, I will go." And early the next morning, Rebecca began her long journey to her new home. She was riding a camel when she saw a man walking in the fields. "Who is that man?" she asked. "That man is Isaac." The man who worked for Abraham introduced Rebecca to Isaac. Then he told Isaac everything that had happened. Isaac married Rebecca, and he loved her. Rebecca was glad God had tugged on her heart. She loved Isaac, and they comforted each other when they were sad. They cared for each other as they grew old. Our first question with this story is, how does God talk to us without using words? All right, our next question is, how did Rebecca's family welcome the man who worked for Abraham? All right, and our last one is, I want you to talk as a family about inviting someone to eat with you. What will you need to get ready for the guests?